Well, hello everybody. How are you? We have a siren to kick us off. So appropriate for what I think is going to be probably one of the most important classes that I teach this year. If you are here right now, all I can say is I'm very excited. I'm very excited. I have been waiting a long time for tonight, and I hope that it's exciting for you too. And here's what I want to tell you. A couple things I want to tell you. I'm so happy to see you. I've been burning some sage. I'm going to burn a little bit more because it feels good. We're coming up on a new moon, as you know. The moon is new on Wednesday morning in Taurus, which is a big deal. You're excited too. Woo! We are, seriously, if you're here right now, you're in the right place. That's all I can say. I love you too. And we are about, seriously, we are about to talk about everything. Everything. What I told my team today is, if I can crack this code, and I will be honest with you, I'm not there yet, but I'm that close. I've been researching Lemuria and Atlantis and the Mu civilization. We'll talk about Lemuria and Mu. I've been researching this for more than half my life. I have worked with gemstone vendors from Brazil, all different parts of the country of Brazil, who've talked to me about Lemurian quartz and why, from their perspective, it's so important and so powerful. And what's really interesting is a lot of the, people who mine crystals in Brazil aren't necessarily involved in a spiritual practice like we are. They aren't necessarily making the connections between those ancient civilizations and all of their wisdom and historical texts and documents and building out a timeline and thinking about it that way. All they know is it's magic. They know that Lemurian crystals are magic. They can't explain it. So what I'm trying to do, and let me be very clear, tonight is going to be part one of what may end up being a 6 or 7 or 10 part series. There is no way in 1 hour, I have you until 6 p.m. Pacific time, there is no way in 1 hour that I could possibly share what I have learned with you. So I imagine it's more like 8 to 12 hours of material that we need to talk about. And so I'm going to break it down, and then what I might do, if we find that, because I want to be able to answer your questions and respond to you, if we find that this becomes just kind of insurmountable in the context of a bonus session, then this will branch off into another class. Because here's what I'll tell you. It's not just a past conversation. That's what really intrigues me. There is a Lemuria, in my opinion, today. And there's a reason. Yeah, it is going to be amazing, you guys. If you have been excited, and if you're excited right now, I don't think you're wrong. I think we're going to be having some very important conversations. But I will tell you, I want to get through all the past stuff because I want you to see it, and I want you to make the connections, and I want you to experience the magic, and I want you to put it all together. But there is a Lemurian energy, and I believe there's actually an active Lemurian civilization now. And I think part of the reason that if you're in my other classes, you've heard me talk about how time is not linear, right? And how, in fact, through a holographic reality, I'm teaching students in my Magical Sabbatical class about holograms and how you can actually create a hologram, how manifestation is actually holographic, and how your brain is holographic, your memories are holograms. That may not make much sense to you, but that's what our sabbatical class was about this month. And it's all related to this. I mean, everything's connected. So if you're in my Magical Sabbatical class, everything I just taught you is going to apply to what we're talking about tonight. If you're here from GemWise, you're probably here to learn about crystals. But let me tell you, crystals are just one part of what I'm going to be teaching you because there's a lot to it. I'm going to be working a lot with symbols tonight. I don't know if you guys are interested in symbols, but what I want to show you is the symbols from the Bible and the symbols from that we work with in sacred geometry. All the symbols in the entire world are connected. They're all connected, and they all have their anchor points in this ancient civilization. So I'm gonna do my very best, and I'm gonna check in with you throughout the evening for the next hour, just to make sure that I'm not kind of like taking it too far too fast, because it's dense information. A lot of you know I'm a professor by training, so I try to sort of like modularize our content and give it to you in spoonfuls so that you don't kind of go like this. There's nothing worse than being in a class where you feel like you're behind. I know that anxiety, so I don't want you to feel like that. So what I want to do is give it to you in chunks, go slow, answer all your questions, and then we'll just keep continuing the conversation. Dense is good, right? Well, here's the thing. All of you who are in the classes this year, I can say this across the board, all of you who are in the classes this year have said that the typical stuff isn't doing it for you anymore. Whatever class you're in, whoever's class you're in, you've asked for something deeper and something a little stickier, you know, something that is really going to help you connect the dots. So that's what I'm trying to do tonight, trying to give that to you. In fact, there's a book I have to grab, so I may step away for just a second, but let's smudge first. I'm so glad you're excited. And this is, so just so you know, in case you didn't know that, this is a bonus session. So you have your regular sabbatical class this month, you have your regular GemWise class this month. This is just a bonus gift to you for being in the programs, to try and give you some additional information so that you can use that to work with your stones. I would love it if you had a Lemurian quartz with you tonight. I would really like that. Now I will tell you, I have a giveaway. I've become quite famous for my giveaways. I do have a gorgeous, huge Lemurian that I have personally worked with in my collection that I will be gifting to one of you tonight. And so we will do that probably toward the middle of the class, because some people have asked me not to wait until the end. But we're not going to go over time tonight. We'll be right at 6 o'clock. We'll be right at 6 o'clock, so you can focus on time and time boundaries and where you need to be this evening. So let me light some sage, and I'm going to burn a little bit of our ceremonial incense. So what I was saying about the new moon is this is a big new moon. In fact, this is, if you read my blog, which is coming out either tomorrow or Wednesday, this is the most important new moon of the entire year for prosperity. I mean, no joke. If you're trying to manifest prosperity or financial abundance and you don't do magic at this new moon on Wednesday, you're missing a huge opportunity. This is like correspondence to beat all correspondence, truly. So you'll definitely want to be on the lookout for the blog post. I will be sharing with you a simple ritual that you can do. And what I want you to do, Lisa said she told her husband she's going to win a crystal tonight. Love that. What I want you to do is I want you to do some manifestation work for the next full cycle from new moon to new moon. And I want your intention to be solely focused on prosperity, because that's what Taurus represents. Taurus attracts money, and Taurus knows how to keep money. That's why they're really good to have working for you. Because Taurus people, there's nobody better at managing money, keeping money, making money than Taurus. So they're the best of the best at that. Okay, so we have smudged. Let me light my incense. I'm going to go grab my book. You go grab any Lemurian crystal you want to work with tonight, because we are going to do a little meditation. Just a brief one. I will do a bonus session where all we do is work with the crystals, okay? But I want to make sure you have the groundwork. I want to make sure you understand what Lemuria is, where it was, when it was, why it was. That's tonight, is laying all that beautiful sacred foundation for your understanding of this civilization and why it matters to you. So just a little of our ceremonial incense, beautiful Palo Santo, lavender. Just calling in some peace and some healing wherever that is needed. Very appropriate for tonight, as so much of what they did in Lemuria was focused on peace and healing. So I think calling all of that in is really beautiful. Okay, I'm going to go grab my book. You go grab anything you need, and I'll be right back here with you in just a minute. Okay. Oh, are you guys excited? You know what I love? Here's what I really love. Are you ready? Because I was a professor for a long time, I really value knowledge. I think knowledge is power. And part of what I love is you guys are excited about learning. You know, it's a beautiful thing. I was telling my son last night, because we always have this little intimate chat before bedtime. And he looked at me and he said, you know, Mama, school's really hard. And sometimes I don't feel like I want to learn. And I looked at him and I said, you know, one day, I know it's hard to believe, you will really miss learning. You'll wish there was somebody who just wanted to teach you things so that your brain could have that beautiful experience that you and I know when your brain is just sort of full and you're learning things that you've always wanted to know, and you're making connections, you know, you're building neural connections, and you can feel your brain expanding when you're learning. You know, if you're doing it right, you can feel your brain just filling with knowledge and wisdom, and those connections are so powerful because knowledge is energy. So when you expand your knowledge base, you are expanding your energy base at the same time. So I said, you know, it's funny, Nick, but I have people come to me as grown-ups and they want to learn because we're not in school anymore. And so we don't always have people who are just interested in sharing information with us. And so I said it, and I said to him, there's a concept called lifelong learner, which Heidi just shared in the feed. And I said, I want to inspire you to become a lifelong learner because wisdom is power. So. So he can't wait to not have a teacher anymore, and here you guys are all excited about your learning, and I'm going to tell him that tonight. Okay. Now, let me share with you why I'm teaching this class. Are you ready? I'm going to read a little bit from this book to you, and it's a great book. So if you love it, great. I'm not knocking it, but I'm going to read a little bit to you because I want you to understand the why of what I'm sharing with you tonight, okay? Are you ready? Close your eyes for a minute. We all come from the stars. We all originate from the one. The starborn are all of us presently incarnate who know that we originate from somewhere beyond this planet. I probably am speaking to you. Mary, this is called The Starborn. The Starborn by Solara. Don't go buy it yet. It's actually not my favorite book, so I have a point in why I'm sharing this with you, okay? We all come from the stars. We all originate from the one. The starborn are all of us presently incarnate who know that we originate from somewhere beyond this planet. The awakened ones are those who remember. Okay? There came a time when all of us had traveled to the roads of third dimensional spirituality as far as they could go. We had done the prayers, rituals, and practices that were supposed to enlighten us. We had committed ourselves to being on a spiritual path, yet something was missing. We found ourselves split between two polarities, our spiritual and our physical worlds. The awakening did not happen overnight. Actually, it had been happening all along, but we had not recognized it. Our next project had to do with power. How do we manifest power? We're in a battle between the sexes for supremacy and control. But now is the new beginning for men and women. We can finally unite together. We've waited so long for this time to come, okay? As our awakening progresses, we shift our beings into a vertical alignment. This is the realm of direct experience, receiving our own guidance and knowing this straight from the one. Let me tell you why I'm reading this, okay? There were so many books like this, okay? Every time I picked up a spiritual book, and again, this is a great book and you might enjoy it. For me, it was frustrating, okay? Because every time I picked up a book like this, I thought, they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying the same thing, but they're not telling me how, and they're not telling me where I came from, and they're not telling me, they're not giving me a timeline. They're not anchoring me in some data. I want to see pictures. I want to see proof. I want to know what was happening. And I will tell you, and Desiree is saying YouTube is repetitive. I started getting really, really frustrated. Okay, and that might be where you are too. And I think it's a great place to get, actually. But I was tired of hearing all these authors say the same thing, which was actually nothing. Nothing. So tonight, what I'm going to try to do is show you everything, as far as I can get. Now, it's funny because Jason, who's my head of marketing, looked at me and he said, this is kind of like another doctoral dissertation for you. And it is, okay? I mean, you could go down this rabbit hole and spend the rest of your life trying to uncover this and end up in interviews and conversations and all this stuff and really never feel like you get to the bottom of it. And the reality is there are still parts of this I can't prove to you. I can't prove to you that underneath Mount Shasta is a portal. Actually, there are entrances in Mount Shasta to this space in the middle of our Earth called Middle Earth, which is run by a civilization called the Agartha civilization, which includes some of the priests and priestesses who chose to disperse to that particular region of the world. But let me back up. So I'm going to try to answer so many questions tonight. For example, you know what the number one question I'm asked about Lemurian quartz crystals is? Are you ready? Number one question, and this is like for the last 6 years, number one question is, what if I find a Lemurian crystal and it comes from China? What if I find a Lemurian crystal and it comes from Madagascar? What if I find a Lemurian crystal that comes from India? Is it a real Lemurian crystal? And so what I can tell you without question tonight, after endless research, and basically what I'm trying to do tonight is save you time, okay? What I can tell you tonight is when that civilization collapsed, as far as I understand, they were scattered everywhere, okay? They didn't just go to Mount Shasta in Minas Gerais, Brazil. Now, those are two places where they did, okay? Those are two places where they did scatter. But they scattered many other places too. And part of the way we can track, okay, part of the way we can track where they went and why they went there is by virtue of something called the Nikal tablets, okay? Now, the Lemurian quartz crystals, there are all of these spots around the globe where scholars say those who left the civilization went to implant what we call the seed crystals. So Lemurian crystals and Lemurian seed crystals are the same thing, okay? They just call them different things. And the reason they call them Lemurian seed crystals is that they have an encryption. Think of it like a code, a secret code. And it's encrypted for a reason. I'm going to show you a timeline tonight, okay? So I'm going to walk you through all this, so don't, just take a nice deep breath. You can take notes if you want. I would recommend it because I don't have all of this written down somewhere, but I want you to know that this is recorded, it's archived. So if you ever want to go back and watch part of it, like if you join late, you can always come back if you want to listen to it a second time. My classes tend to get kind of dense, and so a lot of people tell me they do watch them twice just to go back and pick up the information, which is totally fine. I don't know how to not be dense. We're talking about really dense things. Okay, so where do we begin? I want to start by showing you a map. I've got my notebook here with all my notes and everything to show you for tonight. I'm going to start by showing you a map. Okay, so what you need to know is that Mu is Lemuria, okay? When we talk about Lemuria, what we are talking about is the mother civilization. Mu in that ancient language means mother. And Lemuria is Mu. And that continent, which spanned from, Mu spanned from, here's North America, okay? Mu spanned all the way from California coastline, which is right here, in some diagrams, okay? This is actually the smallest I've seen Mu. I've actually seen Mu drawn where it stretches from Mount Shasta all the way to Australia, and then also all the way to this lower ridge, all the way into the Indian Ocean, of course. And there's a trench. There's a huge trench, actually, all the way along a good chunk of where Hawaii is today, that is still volcanically active. And in fact, Mu was a volcanic creation. And in fact, Mu was created from a series of 7 commandments. And one of the commandments was that fire should emerge from the center of the earth, push up through the crust of the earth, and emerge above the face of the water. That was the actual commandment given in the creation story of Mu. And so Hawaii today is the closest we'll ever get in our lifetimes to experiencing what Lemuria was. I highly recommend that you go to Hawaii at some point in your life. My retirement plan, I'm going to be building a healing community in Hawaii. And so I plan to spend the last part of my life out there healing people and working with people from all over the world. But you need to go. And the reason you need to go is the minute, I promise you, if you haven't been to Hawaii before, and if any of you haven't been, I'd love to know. The minute you step off the plane, you know. The minute I went to Hawaii for the first time, I knew I was home. And I got married in Hawaii. I FedExed my dress and we got on a plane and we got married on a burial ground on Maui, actually where all the ali'i, A-L-I-I, ali'i. I was married on the burial ground where all of the ali'i of the island chain, all of the royalty, including all of the kings, queens, princesses, and princes of Hawaii, are buried where I got married. And I was married by a kahuna, a magician, a shaman in the native Hawaiian tradition. I've just always loved it. We go all the time, and I've taken my children there multiple times. I've taken them out on the burial ground. I wanted them to experience that energy. There's nothing like it. And the reason there's nothing like it has nothing to do with, hula or anything else. It has to do with the fact that I think a lot of us live there. I think a lot of us died there. And so as I share information tonight, I want to just tell you, it could be a trigger. Some of what I share could bring up some very old memories for you. It may not, but I will tell you, when I think about it and I hear about it and I talk about it, I cry. And so if it comes up for you too, it's okay. It's natural. I could be speaking to some part of your lineage. I do think a lot of us have been there together. I'm talking about Lemuria. I do think a lot of us, it's just interesting how we find each other. And sometimes you look and say, how did we find each other? It's like, I don't know. I think we may have been priestesses together at that time. And so I think part of what we're doing is reclaiming our heritage and our lineage and reconnecting with each other. And I told in Sabbatical class, I was like, as many of you who are willing to come to Hawaii and work with me in the next 20 years are invited. It'll be so much fun. It's powerful stuff, and it's as close as we can come. That's the thing. It really is as close as we can come anymore. Okay, so Lemuria was Mu, and Mu basically took up the entire waterway. Mu basically connected North America to Asia for all intents and purposes, okay, and North America to Australia as well, all the way down here. So we crossed the equator, obviously, the hemisphere. So this entire area really was Mu. And then over here, the entire area between North America and Africa was Atlantis. Okay, and Atlantis included all the way down here to parts of Madagascar, which doesn't surprise me at all, because you want to talk about where the most beautiful gemstones in the world come from. A lot of them come from Brazil. A lot of them come from Madagascar. Labradorite, spectrolite, calcite, rose quartz, clear quartz, smoky quartz, all found, ocean jasper, everything in Madagascar, right? When you look and you see that the partner civilization, Atlantis, includes another part of our world, Africa and Madagascar, where some of the most beautiful gemstones that we work with come from, it's not a surprise. Madagascar is everything. It's everything. Okay, so in terms of the question is about whether there's a vortex in Hawaii, there certainly is. In fact, there are multiple vortices in Hawaii. One of them is Haleakala, which means house of the sun. Haleakala is on Oahu. And that's a vortex, to be sure, but that's also a volcano. And most volcanoes have a pseudo vortex energy to them because they're alive and because they're interacting with all four elements. Isn't that cool? I mean, one of the hallmark characteristics of a vortex is the presence of all four elements. It's a conflagration of elements. And so whenever you have a volcano, you automatically have that conflagration active. And so it creates its own vortex in many ways. Mauna Kea, for sure. I would even say Kapalua, which is where I was married, is a vortex. And what's interesting is on Kapalua, did you know that anywhere between 12 and 24 bones, human bones, wash up on the shore of Kapalua every day? There's actually a man named Clifford who I worked with when I was getting married. He's the keeper of the bones on Maui. I had to have his permission to get married on that burial site. And what's really interesting is it's his job to collect all the bones. And so he spends most of his time actually with tourists who are bringing up a bone and going, this looks like a femur. He's like, so what he does is he collects all the bones, they do DNA analysis, and if they are Hawaiian and if they are of these lines, then they get buried in this particular burial ground. If they're not, then they are still buried and given proper burial. They're just not buried in that burial ground, which is reserved for the elite or the royal families. Isn't it incredible? And what's really cool is, so that burial ground where I got married is 7 stories. It's really interesting. They tried to build a hotel on it, and so he was hired to protect it. and prevent building on it. So they're not allowed to build on that burial ground, but it's 7 stories. And so now they're on story 7. So they enter at ground level. It goes 7 stories below ground. And then because there's so many more bones, they're going to start building above ground and take it above ground in the next couple of years. It's a gorgeous altar. They just built the altar actually in the last 3 or 4 years there. And I kept asking him every time we went, I'm like, really no altar? Really no altar? And then when I went back 2 years ago, it was a gorgeous altar full of, leis and just gorgeous, herb offerings and flower offerings. And so I was laughing a little bit because I kept going, really no altar? Says the high priestess, right? Really no altar? Okay. So let me go back to my notes to make sure I share everything with you. So what is Lemuria? I want to go back to basics. Okay, back to basics with you. So we call Lemuria Mu because Mu in the ancient Lemurian language means mother. So just so you know, when you hear me say Mu, I'm talking about the same place. Lemuria and Mu are interchangeable. Okay. It is thought that the Lemurian civilization, that the people who inhabited the Lemurian civilization, arrived from stars, and so they came from the Pleiadian constellation, as well as Alpha Centauri and Sirius. Okay, so those are the stars that the Lemurian beings are thought to have come from. Now, it's really interesting to me, okay? And I'm not trying to be political or draw any weird comparisons between then and now, but there is something in it that just makes me wonder a little bit, like, why is all of this happening now, this reawakening, right? So let me show you a little bit of my timeline, and I apologize, my handwriting is terrible. But let me show you what I have here. Okay. We know, a little bit about our history from 200,000 years ago back to 4.5 million years ago. What we know for sure is that somewhere, and now that you've seen that, I'm going to sit back down, showing you my timeline. Somewhere between 35 and 50,000 years ago is when the Lemurian civilization, the Mu civilization, was created, formalized, and operational. 33 to 70. Now, I know that's a huge window to work with. It's really interesting, Andrea, because there's a piece of land on the road to Hana that we're actually looking at for the healing center. I've always loved that whole stretch of Maui that goes from Ka'anapali all the way to Hana, and so it's interesting that you bring up Hana. Hana for sure is a vortex. I think it's not a surprise that when you go past Hana, you end up, there's some very famous people buried back there, and then on the other side of Hana is just Oprah Winfrey. She owns the whole back half of Maui past Hana, where you really can't drive, so she gets a lot of privacy back there because there's no paved road. Okay, so 33 to 50,000 years ago. That is what we're looking at in terms of the rise, establishment, and full operation of the Lemurian civilization. Something like that, Carol. I think I actually will. Wouldn't it be fun? It'd be really fun, I think, when it happens. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this. Why was this civilization created, and why do we care? Why are we trying so hard to access that state of consciousness? So again, I try to talk about what we're all in agreement about, because you'll read different people's books and you'll hear different things. And so what I'm trying to do with this class is like synthesize and distill, put it together and try to give you the upshot. What all of us agree about when it comes to Lemuria is that it was created to birth our civilization and to create a community, to create a civilization, but I think of it as a community. There were millions of us, but let's call it a community. To create a community where the entire economy was based on love. Okay, so I'm going to show you kind of the strategic plan for what was held in the mind of the priests and priestesses who were charged with creating this civilization, the why of what happened. So the way Lemurians thought about alchemy is they thought about it as a triangle. Okay, at the top of the triangle is wisdom. What Lemurians valued most was information. How they processed, received, and shared information was totally different than we think about today. Okay, so you have to realize this was an entirely telepathic civilization. People may not have used words to communicate. They certainly didn't drive cars to move. We used the Merkaba, you know, the sacred symbol, the Merkaba. I always wear a Merkaba around my neck. This is how we moved. So we could activate the Merkaba, which of course is a multi-dimensional Star of David, really. We could activate the Merkaba, create a movement chamber for ourselves. So the Merkaba we would activate it. It would arrive. The point would be above the top of our head, the top point. The bottom point would be below our feet. And it would move us or anything. You could activate a Merkaba to move a pyramid. You could activate a Merkaba to move stone pillars into something that might look like Stonehenge. You could activate a Merkaba to carve to move and carve steps in a pyramid. You could do almost anything with a Merkaba. It's hard to even imagine, really, how we may have moved and transported ourselves and other structures in that time. Okay, but we did. And it's the reason, if you've been in my classes a long time, it's the reason that babies have a soft spot on the top of their head. Did you know you also have a soft spot, not to gross you out, but between the vagina and the anus? So you have two soft spots, one on the top of your head and one at the bottom of your bits and pieces. And the reason you have those is that's actually where energy exits and enters your body. Okay, so those become these poles. And when you activated the Merkaba, it would connect almost through those soft spots, because that was a point of entry. I didn't want to say it, Lisa, but you did. So thank you, Lisa. I didn't want to go by it's like, oh, the perineum or the you know. Anyway, your bits and pieces, you know, a little bit down there, that's your part of your movement situation. And so that's how you moved. Okay, so you have to, when you think about Lemuria, I don't want you to imagine all of us living there the way we're living now. It would not have been like that. Communication would have been telepathic and instantaneous. Manifestation would have been telepathic and instantaneous. So anywhere you wanted to be, you're instantly there. Anything you wanted to create is instantly created. Anything you want to experience is instantly experienced. Any place, you know, I mean, everything is instantaneous and holographic. It's hard to imagine that reality, but it does feel like home, doesn't it? So think about that. I mean, now, Katie, when I get to the number 7 today, if I get that far today, please remind me to come back to the chakras, okay? Because the significance of the number 7 actually begins with Lemuria. Did you know that? When I start getting into the symbols with you guys, the nerds and the geeks like me are going to really geek out for a minute, because it's hard to believe that almost every symbol we think of today, through Egypt, through the Mayan and Aztec civilizations, through Mesopotamia, through Egypt and Greece, through Rome, through everything that we think about today as being associated with the Christian tradition, the Muslim faith, and so on, every single symbol, almost, okay, including flower of life, the cross, everything, is actually documented to have come from that civilization by virtue of these tablets, these Nikal tablets that actually do exist, and that reflect the information that was being shared and used to connect people and their energies during that time. And here's what's really interesting. So when the civilization collapsed, and I want you to think about it this way. Sorry to keep showing you my notes, but I'm old school. This is the civilization, right? When Mu collapsed, they had to figure out where to go, okay? So a good amount of the priests and priestesses, the people who were the keepers of the wisdom, went to India, actually. And from India, the information was transferred to Egypt, and then from India, it also moved out to almost every other place in the world where the information was shared, including Babylonia, all of the Middle East. So that's why I'm saying even the Quran, I mean, even some of the symbols sacred to the Muslim faith are also rooted in Lemuria, because it went from Mu to India to Babylonia, and then all the way up the Middle Eastern peninsula and through all of those countries. Isn't it interesting? So the Nikal tablets are spelled N-A-A-C-A-L. And the Nikal were actually a brotherhood. They were priests. So we're going to do a whole separate section, probably part 2 of this, on priests and priestesses of Lemuria, their roles and responsibilities. And I'm actually going to create a little quiz that might help you understand if you may have been a priest or priestess of Lemuria. So I'm working on that for part 2. There was a question from Melinda about why did it collapse? Okay, so here's the reigning theory. You ready? And this is why I'm saying the connections to right now are fascinating to me. I'm not saying we're repeating ourselves, but I'll leave it to you. I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are, okay? So you had Lemuria and Atlantis, okay? Lemuria came first, Atlantis came second, and there were wars going on between the two civilizations because Lemuria was created primarily to do this alchemy I was talking about earlier, where you combine wisdom with truth and love. And that's how they created magic. I mean, think of alchemy as however you define alchemy, and there isn't just one kind of alchemy, okay? And in fact, the alchemy that we talk about now of the Middle Ages, where we transformed base metals to gold using, sulfur and copper and other materials, that's almost not even interesting to me. Because do you know what that is? That's a translation and a distillation of information and wisdom that's so much older. It's almost like a copy of a copy of a copy, and I'm not saying it's not worth exploring, but I am saying I think if we want to get to the bottom of this, okay, which is kind of my life goal, is to get to the bottom of this. I think we have to look at modern magic, okay, let's say the last 200 to 400 years, and realize it's an echo. But what's it an echo of? If you're not digging deeper, you're not going to find the answers. You're going to be, it's almost like, how do I describe this? I think if you just work with modern magic, you'll only get so far, both into the mysteries, into your own ability to manifest, into magic. You're going to get this far. And why I've been frustrated, you know, I'm almost 44. Why I get frustrated is no matter how many classes I take or books I read or people I talk to, where I go, I travel, I only get this far. And so what I've decided is anything I'm interested in the modern, including modern alchemy, I want to trace it back and understand what were the ancients really trying to do. Okay, so here's how it gets very interesting. If you look at Pythagoras and Plato, who I think of as, you know, the mathematical fathers of alchemy, really, in many ways, they, Plato and Pythagoras, both received transmissions, downloads, information from Lemuria. They're two who are documented to have received all of their equations from the Lemurian civilization. Lemurians were working with geometry and math. And in fact, so here's what I want to tell you. The reason the Lemurian civilization was created was to build the code to God. Okay? The Lemurian civilization was created to build the mathematical and spiritual code to God and to plant that information into our planet so that as it went through its various stages of cataclysmic growth and destruction, which the Lemurians predicted, we would continue to have a race of people who would have access to that wisdom and that alchemy and that magic. Does that make sense? So that because remember, time is not linear and it's all happening right now. And so wouldn't it make sense that whatever the Lemurians wanted Plato and Pythagoras to have, which of course they knew they were going to take that and build modern mathematics, which would supply our entire civilization with all of the structures and everything that we have now. But I think they also knew that what they gave to Pythagoras and Plato would keep us limited to a certain extent too, because the work of Plato and Pythagoras, which is central, right, to modern philosophy and modern mathematics, we wouldn't have modern philosophy and modern mathematics without Plato and Pythagoras. But in a way, it has kept us entrenched or sort of tied to a model that's too analytical, doesn't acknowledge the reality of the significance of energy, love, wisdom, and everything that we're talking about together today. Does that make sense? Now, Carol's asking a flippin' fantastic question. I just want to make sure I read all the comments in the, in the feed too. Carol's asking a flippin' fantastic question, which is, were other planets involved? And as far as we know, the answer is yes. The answer is unequivocally yes. I would say that other planets are involved. And I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get there in terms of making the connections to the other planets that also are aware of this. But okay, so going back to why it was created, was to experiment with what would happen if we built an alchemical system based on love. And the idea was that, you know, love is the only emotion that can truly connect people, connect levels of consciousness. It truly is the only energy that can do that. No other energy. And when I say love, I'm talking about a deep and abiding connectedness. I'm not talking about I love my husband or I love my dog. I'm talking about a universal sense of oneness and connection that transcends time, space, and energy. Okay, like an effervescent, eternal connection that abides in each of us to each other, which is why the Lemurians were working with the flower of life. Okay, among many other symbols, many other symbols. Okay. Now, here's an interesting, so Sarah's saying maybe other planets didn't want us to build this code. There are people right now who think, and I talk to people like this all the time, there are people right now who think that we are actually being blocked. Our planet is being blocked from outside our galaxy, from developing beyond where we are now for specific reasons that aren't being shared with us. And so we think we should be more advanced. We think we should be able to teleport and transport and use energy to move things and use sound to move. And there are a lot of us who are awakening now and starting to work with Lemurian sea crystals and activate this information and everything else. But these folks believe that we are being blocked not by ourselves and not by anything in our specific universe or multiverse, but that we're being blocked by something outside. Lisa says that she thinks we're not really ready. Eva says she knows why. I love it. I mean, I have theories. I don't like to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, but I have theories about why we might be being blocked. Okay. Yeah, it's a layer. It is a layer in our atmosphere. And why? You know, there's names for it. People are calling it a gate and so on and so forth. There are theories about whether we're just going to implode ourselves from inside, and so that they're not protecting us, they're actually protecting themselves. And then you watch the news and you think, well, right, hopefully everything will be okay. Why was it destroyed? So the Lemurian civilization, and if I'm going too fast, too far, too fast, please, 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 I love the feedback. Just say, you know what, can you slow down? Can you go back? I'm not following you. I'm trying really hard to make sure that I'm chunking this for you. The reigning theory about why Lemuria was destroyed is that there was Lemuria and Atlantis. The Lemurians were focused on love and focused on energy and wisdom, and in many ways the Lemurians were trying to build what the ancient Greeks were trying to build, which is a culture and a civilization based on wisdom and math. It's funny that I think, and lots of my friends believe this, and I believe it too, that the only culture on earth who's ever really come close to replicating what Lemuria created is Greece. Because there was a full desire to create a culture based on information and math, and trying to connect math to energy and to philosophy. I mean, the Greeks came really, really close. The Egyptians too, I would say, have come very, very close. But you have to, again, and this is where it blows my mind. So if this doesn't blow your mind, that's okay, but it certainly blew my mind when I first heard it. The Egyptian culture is a copy. It's not an original. In fact, nothing from Egypt is original. The scarab is from Lemuria. The pyramid is from Lemuria. And in fact, when the Lemurian civilization collapsed, one of the places that priests and priestesses were sent to was the Sphinx. As it's told, the entire left foot of the Sphinx is a chamber, an entrance point into Middle Earth, and that there are entrance points to Middle Earth all around the world. But one of the entrance points to Middle Earth is under the left foot of the Sphinx. So, and the Sphinx as a symbol, you know, these half animal, half human forms, that's Lemurian. So when you look at Thoth or Thoth, depending on how you pronounce that, and you think, oh, that's so original, that had to be, you know, from Egypt, you know, those Egyptians were so original. No. In some of the Nakal tablets, you see half animal, half human. I mean, everything that you think about is Egyptian today, truly. Hieroglyphs, the way they, the way they worked with energy and sound. The scarab itself. The scarab itself was an instant manifestation. The way the Lemurians used the scarab is the shape of the scarab when it was drawn and activated could instantly manifest any vision. It was thought of as the symbol of creation, one of the main symbols of creation. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so so the Lemurian and the Atlanteans, the Lemurian people and the Atlantean people did not get along, as the story goes. Again, we weren't there, but this is the story. And so there was war. And some people have defined or described the war between Lemuria and Atlantis as thermonuclear. Now, you could look at that. Again, I want you to kind of like check what you think you know. You could look at that and say, really? I mean, they had thermonuclear weapons at their disposal, 33 to 50,000 years ago, really? And the skeptic in me does that too, except, again, you have to remember, it's a very Western mindset to say, oh, back then they didn't have blah, blah, blah. Back then they couldn't do blah, blah, blah. What I can tell you for sure, having done this for more than half my life, I think we are backward. I think we don't have any technology. I think we don't know what we're doing. I think we don't have access to the information. I think if we could go back and actually see what was happening in Lemuria and Atlantis, we would go, really, we're modern and they're ancient, right? So kind of check that assumption if that comes up for you, like, oh, but that can't be true, because check that assumption, because I actually believe that they were much more advanced than we are, and we're catching up. And we're trying real hard to catch up. But the problem that you and I run into every single day is that we're human. Doesn't it suck? Sometimes it sucks. Some of us are maybe kind of part not human, but most of us are pretty human. Okay, so they were fighting. The Atlanteans were more interested in technology, as the story goes, and more interested in what they could build, what they could create, how they could expand using technology. The Lemurians were not as interested in that. They thought that their development and their advancement would come from understanding and communication and love and harmony, okay? That's the war. The Atlantean civilization was not a peaceful civilization. It was, and here's why I think it was. Again, this is just the world according to Athena. I'm trying to give you what other people say and then add my own perspective to it. The Atlantean civilization, I think, was just as magical as Lemuria, but I think they were given a different vision, a different focus, and a different intention for the work that they were trying to do. And I think they were trying to activate something more powerful than had been activated on Mu. And I think there was some disagreement about whether to do that. Why should we do this? And if if you're part of the Lemurian civilization, which is like, hold on, we haven't even achieved our primary mission. What are we doing looking into these other things? And then you have Atlantis, right? So they fought. And so as the story goes, there was thermonuclear warfare, which caused the destruction of everything. And so again, I don't want to go too far too fast tonight, but where my father's family comes from is Crete. And the island of Crete is actually the Minoan civilization. It was the original matriarchy. It was the first matriarchy on the planet, as modern history goes. And that civilization was destroyed volcanically. It's under ash. Archaeologists have dug and discovered lots of that civilization in Minoa, or on Crete, but it was destroyed. And so you could look at all of the loss of these ancient civilizations, all being imploded, by fire and flood, and being destroyed by all these natural disasters. Which, of course, where do we hear about the Great Flood? Where else does that narrative show up for us? Don't you remember Noah, right? And so there's lots of conversations about whether there was just one flood. Whether there was just one flood. Very interesting, isn't it? Yes, the connection to Pompeii, for sure. I mean, if you think about it, Pompeii, Minoa. I mean, I don't think it's an accident that all of these civilizations crumbled by fire and water, right? I just don't think it's a coincidence. And that so much of, I'm not sure who said it in the feed, but I loved it, so I wish I could give you credit. Remind me if it was you who said it, that in the fall of these civilizations, we also lost our consciousness. If you really think about what Lemuria and Atlantis were, they were a consciousness empire. And I want you to close your eyes for a minute, okay? I want you to close your eyes for a minute. Imagine if on this planet right now, there were two major continents. I mean, size of North America or larger, right? Think about size of Asia, maybe. That were solely focused on developing an empire of consciousness, where the only goal was to see how far and how fast we could advance in our connection to God by finding and activating these sacred codes through symbols and through language that would connect us ultimately with the source of our own very being. It's a powerful thing to think about. we don't have a point of reference for this. We don't have any kind of precedent for this. So when we think about it, it's almost so hard for us to wrap our brains around. And yet I think we have to, because I will tell you, I think the secret to everything, and I'm not kidding you, I think the secret to everything, including how to heal your body, how to find and locate and really activate peace and love in your life in a way that isn't just temporary, that really is going to change the entire course of your life, the way to manifest what you seek, the way to heal our planet, is all hidden here. And it's almost like we're not, at least I have felt, we're not connecting the dots, we're not making the connection. And you can say, well, we're not making the connection because nobody's looking, or you can say we're being prevented from making the connection. And I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like I'm getting kind of close. And that's my goal with you, is to give you as much as I can share with you. Isn't that beautiful? Lisa said when she closed her eyes, a triangle formed. Can you imagine? And here's the thing you have to remember too. I mean, I see a shift. I see a complete shift. Even from 6 years ago when I started doing Sage Goddess in the way that it exists now. Like I said, I've been doing metaphysical work all my life, but Sage Goddess is 6 years old. Since that time, I mean, think about the proliferation of people who are talking about crystals and gemstones. And it's funny because the OGs of us, you know, me and Hibiscus Moon and a few of us who've been around for a long time, we talk to each other and we're like, who's that person? Where'd they come from? But people are popping up left and right. And I think part of it is there's a grand calling of, you know, to arms right now for people who can hold and expand and open and work with these higher levels of awareness. I think there's a call to arms. And I'm inspired by it. You know, I get really excited because I think, gosh, the more of us who are conscious and aware, who participate, you know, who honor the call, the more of us who do that, we're going to become anchors on our planet. And so because I do think, and you may think I'm crazy, and that's totally okay, you wouldn't be the first person to think that, I really do think that there's an active Lemurian civilization on our planet right now. And I actually think that they communicate with us. I think they support us. I think they provide us with wisdom and information at the times that we need it. And those moments of insight, you know, where you're like, gosh, where did that come from? Or in meditation or connection. I think sometimes it's your spirit guides. And I think sometimes it's these guides who are still operating on our planet at our frequency, who are here to support us. And I don't think they're safe to make themselves known. And I don't think that we are necessarily ready to engage with them one-to-one. But I do feel a connection. And I think a lot of us do. Do they know who they are? Oh, they sure do know who they are. And there's names for it. Some people call it the Agartha civilization. You know, Middle Earth is well documented. There's lots of YouTube, you know, videos and lots of writing about it. Again, sometimes it seems crazy, but I will tell you, when I check it with myself, like, does this seem true? It resonates with me that there is a civilization operating right now and that they've been sort of forced underground. But I think that lots of people know about them and make contact with them. And the more you learn, I mean, it depends on what you want to believe. But I've read stories about how there are entrance points to Middle Earth all over the world. And actually that they're connected to significant structures, even governmental structures. And so there's access points to this central location from many different parts and places of the world. I think we're being prepped. I don't know all the answers to this, you guys, I have to say. There will be places in our conversation where you reach the limit of my awareness. And because I haven't traveled to those places, I think I've seen part of it in Journey, but I haven't had a waking experience of connecting with that place yet. So, but I believe that's what it is. I believe it's the remnants. And primarily of people who, so what happened when Lemuria was destroyed? Half, they say, of the priests and priestesses, and this kind of makes me, this is where I get emotional, half of the priests and priestesses stayed and went down with the island. Half of the priests and priestesses left. And they left to take the crystals that were encoded with the symbols and the wisdom and implant them at these strategic locations around the world. And like I said, most people think of it as Minas Gerais, Brazil, and Mount Shasta, California. And those are certainly two locations, but there are many others in Malaysia, in India, It's fascinating. You know, one of the symbols, for example, from Lemuria is the flower of life. The flower of life is on ancient temple walls in India, ancient temple walls in Malaysia, ancient pyramid walls in Egypt. It's everywhere. You know, there are temples throughout Europe where you find the flower of life. You know, an impression, almost like a glyph of it. Incredible, incredible things. So it's hard for me because when I hear that story about how half stayed and died, and they talk about how they sang as the water rose, that resonates more with me as what could have been my experience as opposed to being transported and implanted. I think I may have gone. And it's hard. It's hard. And I think that's why I, to this day, I can't swim. I'm terrified of water. Even if I get, like, I have small children and I've made sure that they can swim really, really well. If I get too close to the water, I start to break out. It's such an embedded fear. And I'm 90% sure, because I cry anytime I hear that story, that I was one who chose to go. I would love to host a Lemurian shamanic journey at Sage Goddess. Can you imagine? For all of us to go back? Can you imagine going back? Just for a moment, you know, it's there and if you want to really like see if this resonates with you, just try Googling Lemuria, you know, or click on images and start looking through. When I do that, I just cry, you know, when I see the images of the castles, you know, I mean, literally it was like ice castles, crystal castles, and I see the water and I see the dolphins, and I just can't. I'm overcome. So I do think that's such a great question. Moon Siren, she said, do you think some of us are Lemurian and some of us are Atlantean? I absolutely do. And I think, and there's a fun little quiz actually. If you ever read Lost Lands by Lucy Cavendish, which is one of my favorite books on Lemuria, she actually has a quiz to tell if you're, I think it's Lemurian or Atlantean. Kind of fun. And so, but you know, the questions are things that you would expect, like, do you love technology? You know, are you more rational? Are you more analytical? Those things tend to mean that you may have had more of an Atlantean profile as opposed to Lemurian. Okay, so let's talk about the crystals for just a minute. Let me first share with you. I want to share with you one more thing, and I want to give you a preview of next time. Can you believe we've been together for 1 hour and 5 minutes? I don't know where it goes. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about crystals and show you a couple things, okay? Now, this is one of the original symbols of Lemuria. I'm going to walk you through this next time. Obviously, you see the Star of David, and we're going to talk about, you know, the sun inside of it, the Star of David, which is thought to be a Stargate portal that you could use to move and to access other dimensions, okay? I'm going to show you next time. I'm going to teach you about the Lemurian creation story. So every culture and every civilization, every culture, every civilization has a creation story. The Mayans have a creation story. The Aztecs have a creation story. The Greeks have a creation story. The Christians have a creation. I mean, everybody has a creation story about how their culture emerged and why, and what their sacred purpose is for being alive. This is in symbols, which is how the Lemurians communicated. This is the Lemurian creation story, and I'm going to tell you that story next time. I want you to notice it begins with a snake. That's very important for you to know, okay? The Lemurian civilization story begins with a snake. And so we're going to trace that snake. Does that sound familiar to you? Think of Eve. Think of what the snake represents. And then there were 7 forces of creation in the Lemurian civilization, which became known as the 7-headed serpent, which I have a photograph of, so here's one of the early images. It's actually similar to an image from the Nakal tablets. Do you see the 7 heads of the serpent? Do you see that there? Well, the Mayans have a serpent god, don't they? Every culture has a serpent god. And then if you look back to the Bible, the number 7, right? The 7 horses of the apocalypse. In Babylonia, 7 vases associated with priests and ritual sacrifices. The number 7, and all of that began with Lemuria. The importance of the snake as a symbol of wisdom It became a symbol of temptation in the Christian tradition. But the importance of the snake, that didn't begin with the Mayans or the Aztecs, and it didn't begin with the Christians. It began in Lemuria. And then next time I'm going to talk to you too. Did you know that Ganesha doesn't come from the Hindu tradition? No. There's an elephant god. This is also based on an early Nepal representation of their elephant god. And if you look closely, there's the trunk coming down. Looks very much like that, doesn't it? Except it's not Hindu. Okay, here is the god Vishnu from the Hindu tradition. And he has the 7 serpents on his head. You see that? On the top of his boat. Seven snakes from the Hindu tradition. Except it's not a Hindu tradition. It's a Lemurian tradition. So I'm going to take you through all of that next time. Woo! Okay, there's one more thing I want to share with you. I want to do a giveaway, and I want to talk about the crystals for just maybe 5 or 10 minutes, okay? Can you guys stay for a couple more minutes? Are you enjoying this? Is this fun for you? I love it. Are you guys with me? Is this okay, the pace and everything? Because if tonight worked for you, I'll kind of follow a similar structure and pace next time. If it was too fast or too slow, just give me feedback and I will modify. Okay, here are the lessons of Lemuria. Are you ready? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are you ready? This is mine. Okay, this isn't. You're not going to find this information elsewhere. This is from everything that I've read and everything I've researched. These are the 6 lessons from Lemuria that we have integrated. Are you ready? You got to write these down because they don't exist anymore. Lesson number 1. There is no such thing as solitude. There's no such thing as one. There is only a duality. And I'm going to walk you through all the symbols of the creation story of Lemuria, which is going to show you how they understood that concept in symbolic terms. Okay, I'm so happy to see you guys, and I'm so glad. Emma wants me to go slow. A lot of you are okay, so I'm gonna monitor you. And what I would tell you is ask me questions. That's really helpful. I try to come back to the feed and make sure to respond to your questions. So lesson number 1 is you're never alone. There is no such thing as one. There is only 2. It's very interesting. There's only duality in the universe. So you are never alone. Lesson number 2 that we have learned from Lemuria. Are you ready? That fear destroys. It destroys you. It destroys your body. It destroys civilizations. Did you know that there are diseases rooted in fear? Did you know that Chinese doctors believe, and this is widely known, that diseases like MS are actually caused by trauma? Sustained trauma over time blows your central nervous system. What do you think about that? When you are afraid for a long time, and I've had clients, women who've been in abusive relationships, for example, where they have been afraid over a long period of time, that shows up in the body, my friends. That's not just a mental or emotional experience. So endometriosis, MS, cancer, we know a lot of diseases that have their roots, their claws in fear. Fear is so bad for you. If there's one thing I would want you to change in your life, truly, like if I could, as your girlfriend, right, as your BFF, as your learning partner, if there's one thing I could kind of reach through the screen and change in your life right now, it would be any fear that you experience. And I would coach you to work through it and ask you to please release it, because A, nothing you fear ends up happening most of the time anyway, and B, it's really hurting you. It's hurting your body. It's hurting your life. So I need you to let it go. Replace fear with love. We learned from Lemuria that power over other people is not liberating. It's binding. It's actually a form of slavery. And that the most important power that we should have is power with each other, power through each other. That with each other we can create more than we can create alone. And we learned that lesson with Lemuria. The Lemurian civilization taught us, so first of all, you have to know the Lemurian civilization is one big heart chakra, okay? But most of our modern civilization is based in the root chakra. Again, it's fear, security. Do I have enough? Do I have what I need? Should I be afraid? You're looking over your shoulder all the time. That wasn't how Lemuria was. Lemurians moved from the heart center, not the root center. So they weren't worried about basic needs and things like that. They weren't preoccupied. They were moving from the heart center of how do I feel? How can I love more? I want to experience more emotion in my life. How can I support you? How can I nourish you? How can I nurture you? And then how can I receive love? How can I receive nurturing? How can I be open with my emotions? So moving from the root chakra to the heart chakra has been one of our big lessons from Lemuria. And so Lisa, thank you for that. Lisa, so do you guys remember when I just talked about the seven vases in Babylonia that represented the sacrifices of the high priest and priestesses, the 7 heads of the serpent? How many chakras do you have? How many days in a week? That number and the fact that it's echoed throughout our entire culture and even our metaphysical practice, again, is not anything modern. This is all borrowing from Lemuria and how we learn from Lemuria the significance of the number 7. Okay, the next lesson we learned is that the snake isn't evil. We would believe from modern narratives, particularly the Christian narrative, that the snake is evil and actually the root of all evil, and that it corrupts, that it takes 2 perfect beings and it separates them and splits them because wisdom is evil. And what Lemuria teaches us is the snake is not evil. The snake actually is a symbol of transformation, and that it can cause change, which can be very powerful, and that wisdom itself is probably the most powerful tool you have at your disposal. I always say your most powerful magical tools are hands and your mind. Crystals are great, but if you don't use your hands and your mind, you might as well not even have crystals. So we learned that too. Today we have a single strand of DNA. In Lemurian times, we had 3 to 5 strands of DNA because we were multidimensional beings. And so what that meant was, this is fascinating to me, and it may resonate with you, and actually, if you like this, I want to build a whole meditation around it, probably for Sabbatical, because it would be more germane to you. So if you like it, I'll do that. They had multiple strands of DNA. And so what happened was, if there was any recoding that had to happen in any of the strands, they would borrow from one strand of DNA to recode the other. And so there was a constant regeneration of and recoding of the DNA. And that's why there was no sickness, disease, or illness in that civilization. And so part of what we're talking about in our healing communities is, I'm not going to be able to manifest 3 to 5 strands of DNA right now. So there's mortal constraints to what we can do. But can you imagine, because everything is holographic, can you imagine if we could produce a holographic strand of DNA? You guys in Sabbatical will be able to follow this. Can you imagine if we could create a holographic strand of DNA that we could pull from? We could go in, read our DNA, scan it, see where there might be any recoding that's necessary to avoid genetic diseases and so forth, pull in from a hologram to recode. And Pushi was asking, do I think that we're being, kind of summoned to be able to do this work, maybe to manifest additional strands of DNA? I don't know, but you know what? It resonates with me. So when I run it through my, does this sound possible filter in my Athena mind, I go, you know what? That sounds true to me. I think we actually could probably, at least holographically, create multiple strands of DNA that we could use to pull from and recode. And if I was still doing one-to-one work with clients, I'd probably want to use that as a metaphor or a process to see, if I've got somebody with cancer, can I identify the source of the cancer in the DNA code? Can I holographically create a second strand of DNA? Can I harvest from the second strand of DNA to modify and recode the primary strand of DNA? Isn't that interesting? So that is lesson number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 7, not 6. So going from single strand to multi-strand DNA, we learned that from Lemuria, because the Lemurians were able to activate healing on a level and a volume that we can't even begin to comprehend today. No disease. No disease. Some of us are getting close, and this is what we're doing. So I just want to share that with you. And then the last thing we learned from Lemuria is math isn't just math. It's really funny. I think about back as a kid, I just flipping hated math. I thought math was made by the devil. I thought it was awful. And part of it is I wasn't very good at it. I got good at it as an adult, and I went through statistics with my doctoral degree, but for goodness sake, I hated math. And it's funny, so now as an adult, I see that what we learned from the Lemurian civilization is math isn't just math. Math is a code. Math is a code. Geometry is a code. And there is a code to God. There's an access code to God. And it's connected to sacred geometry and everything that we study and learn together. It's encoded in your crystals. It is represented by the sacred symbols and shapes that we work with. It is embedded in the DNA of our plants and flowers. So when you work with essential oils, you're activating that code in a very real way. This isn't woo-woo, airy-fairy. This is very real. You are activating the DNA and the code that's encrypted in your stones, and it's encrypted in your plants. It's waiting there dormant for you to activate it, and that's lesson number 7 from Lemuria. Okay, so let me repeat the 7 really quick, just so I can make sure you guys got your notes. Lesson number 1 is there's no such thing as a single entity. You're never alone. At the lowest quantity is a duality. And even within you, there's a duality between the divine masculine and divine feminine. So you are an embodied duality. You're never alone. Lesson number 2 is fear destroys. And so we have to activate a love center. And in fact, I think the whole secret to healing, at least as far as we have information to do this now, is recoding the DNA and then activating the DNA with love. But that sounds really easy. It's actually really hard. It is so hard for human beings to have a pure experience of love that's not mitigated by jealousy or fear or hatred or anger or frustration, by all of our lower vibration human emotions. It's almost possible to have an unmitigated relationship or experience of love, even for the most spiritual person, because we're human. And then there's taking us out of the root chakra into the heart chakra. The next lesson was the snake is not evil. The snake is actually a symbol of sacred wisdom and transformation. The next lesson is we have a single strand of DNA now, but we've had more before, and so you can recode your DNA. If you believe that reality is holographic, and if you believe that time is not linear, then the Lemurian civilization exists right now. And so why can't you activate additional levels and layers of DNA? Why can't you? And the last lesson is math is not just math. Math is the code to God. It's the access code to God. And we will get there. If not in this lifetime, then the moment we die. Because I think that's what happens. I think you take your last breath, and then the great mystery presents itself in front of you. And on you go. Okay. So let's talk about the crystals just for a minute. We'll get more into the crystals, and we will work with them more in session 2. And by the way, hopefully this is good news. I created an entire section on the website tonight under class tools with every single Lemurian crystal, perfume, which I've been anointing myself with all day long. Every single Lemurian everything is in a section on the website under class tools called Lemuria. And everything is 15% off with code Gaia. So hopefully that's really good news. I mean, there is so much stuff in there. There's, let me show you really quickly what's in there. There are Lemurian light crystals, in case you're missing something from your collection. We have sunset aura generators. Look at this little gorgeous beauty. See the lions? That's how you know you have a Lemurian, because you need to see lines. They call it the staircase to heaven. Isn't that beautiful? So those are in the shop in that special section. I even have blue onyx, which some people refer to as Lemurian onyx. And so there's lots of beautiful tumbled and pyramids. There's these beautiful pyramids. Aren't these gorgeous, beautiful Lemurian energy? There's Larmar, which is Lemurian, of course, because it comes from the Dominican Republic, which is over where we knew Atlantis existed. But this is what you're looking for. So how do you know you have a Lemurian seed crystal? Let me make sure you can really see. Okay, do you see these lines right here? It's really hard with the light the way it is. Let me see if I can, I may need to shut my my blinds a little bit. But there are lines. Oh, you can kind of see right there. Do you see those right there? That line there and that line there. It's like Braille. Lemurians are like Braille. And that's exactly how you're supposed to work with it. So if you have a Lemurian with you right now, okay, yeah, the blue onyx, you guys, should be with your Larmar and your Lemurians. Here's what I want you to think about. Do you know what color was the primary color that Lemurians worked with? Blue. Shouldn't surprise you. And all the Lemurian stones are either clear or blue. It's fascinating to me. I mean, Larmar is one of the primary Lemurian stones. It's actually one of the best ones to wear. You can make a beautiful necklace out of the pieces that we have in the shop right now. Isn't that gorgeous? And that's going to connect you to all that watery Lemurian energy. But you don't need a big piece. I mean, this is a naturally little double terminated Lemurian from the site. That's going to be as powerful for you as a big mama Lemurian. But it's not going to be as powerful as the one that I'm giving away tonight, which is, I can't even begin to tell you how special this piece is. And I'm so excited for whoever of you gets it tonight. This is a naturally double terminated, in fact, it's multi-terminated Lemurian, which means it's naturally terminated on this side and it's naturally terminated on this side. So it sends and receives energy. I don't have very many of these. I mean, not even in my own personal collection, don't have very many of these. It's really hard to find a giant, naturally double terminated light crystal, because this one's clear. And here's what else is really cool. You guys in GemWise will love this. So do you know what Native Americans do with double terminated crystals that they can see through? They call them scanners. So interesting. So what they do is they have the person stand and they hold the crystal up, and they do it. They don't have the person do it. They run it all the way along their body and back up, and they're looking through the crystal at the person's body. And they can see pockets where the chakras are blocked. They can see disease, which shows up as dark spots. And then what they do is they use a crystal to extract, like a Vogel, to extract the energy, any dark pockets of energy that they see. Isn't it cool? Wouldn't it be fun to work with this and see if you can use it as a scanner? A lot of you are strong enough energetically and magically that I think you could activate this and really make it very, very powerful. Okay, so if you want to do a quick meditation, we're going to do a much longer one in these sessions, so stay tuned. And that's why if you want to get a piece tonight, you could actually use your piece next time, because we won't do the next session for a couple of weeks. But your primary meditation with a Lemurian is to rub those lines. I like to do it with my eyes closed. Remember, it's Braille. And let your mind just sort of go fuzzy for a minute. Call in your guides. You can open a sacred circle, you know, just sort of open your circle, send the energy around. Call in your guides and ask them to decode and activate the wisdom of your crystal. And I'm telling you this because this is the number one thing people don't know about working with Lemurian crystals. The wisdom is encoded. The information is encoded. It's implanted. Any information that's implanted or encoded has to be released. It's stored. So you have to release it and activate it. And so that's what you do. But you have to call in your guides and you have to ask your guides. You can ask your higher self. You can ask your, ancestral guides, whoever you want to call upon, to work through you and with you to activate and release the stored information, to decode it. And you can go even a step further to give them permission to activate this wisdom and information in your life today. I always use the caveat. And Karen's asking, what if there's only 4 lines? Karen, if there's only 1 line, that's okay. But here's the mantra I use. You ready? I always say, and I say, I call in my guides, as I open the circle, I call in my guides, ancestral guides, spirit guardian, animal spirit, any animal spirits you want to come through, any ancestors who've gone to the light, because you only want to work with your ancestors if they're healed on the other side. So any ancestors who've gone to the light, I welcome you to my circle. I ask you on my behalf to activate and decode the wisdom and information that's encrypted in my Lemurian seed crystal, and to activate that wisdom and information in my life today in service of my path, in service of my highest good. So only activating the wisdom and information that will serve my path. And that kind of is a filter, and what I have found in my life is you have to be specific with your guides. They're looking out for you, they're protecting you. They're not going to do anything that's dangerous to you. But I do find that giving them a little bit of wisdom and information and guidance from my perspective about my intention for working with the crystal is helpful. I do think of my relationship with my guides as a partnership. And in my experience, they appreciate that. I think people who just sit there and wait for the guides to come and for the wisdom to fall from the heavens, I think that's probably not how it works. I think you have to participate in the process and then give a little guidance. I always say too, I always ask my guides, please help me learn and discern and receive any wisdom or information that's going to support me on my path. But if possible, please allow me to learn the lessons, to receive the wisdom and information in a way that won't cause me physical, mental, or emotional pain. That's another request that you can make. And I have seen people going through really difficult times all of a sudden make that request to their guides and experience a much easier flow. You know, it's like sometimes when you feel like you're just learning lesson after lesson after lesson and the universe is really kicking you in the ass, sometimes it's okay to say, hey, I'm good for today. You know, I'm good. I'm good. I'm great. I'm ready. Yeah, in a way that's not scary, right? Okay. So I think I know who this is going to. So I'm going to announce it because it's really funny. I always wait. I don't decide giveaways until I see the feed. But as soon as the feed starts, my attention usually goes right to the person that needs to receive this crystal. So the first person who came to mind for me tonight in working with this crystal is Janet. And she is one of the first comments I saw. So Janet, I hope you're still online. I am holding this crystal for you. Janet, if you would like me, I always say this with giveaways, if you would like me to do any kind of ritual work with this crystal before sending it to you, I am more than happy to do that for you. We're coming up on a new moon. And so I can keep it for you, do a little new moon work with it Tuesday into Wednesday, and then I can ship it to you on Thursday. Or, Janet, if you'd rather just get this thing, I can ship it to you tomorrow. So what I would love is, Janet, if you could please send me a private message. Does anybody know if Janet saw? I hope she saw. If you can please send me a private message and let me know, and direct me a little bit about how you'd like me to work with your crystal. I would be delighted either way. It's always a choice, you know, whether you would like your crystal activated from my end. Or if you'd like to work with it, you know, in your own way from your end. I'll show you another piece of Lemurian just before we go. I had these back in the shop. So one thing you got to know, we have a few Janets. I have to go back in the feed and remember which Janet I was speaking about. I pinged on her first name, but not on her last name. So I will announce in Sabbatical and in GemWise tonight I can't remember. I can't pronounce your name, Janet. It ended in AK. Does that help? So I will go back and I will find the exact spelling of her last name and announce that in both the groups. So I'm not leaving all of our Janets hanging. But one thing I'm going to tell you is once in a while at Sage Goddess, you got to keep an eye on us because we get things in sometimes and then they're gone and and we never get them again. And so if you are one of the people who got one of the Phantom Lemurians, do you remember this? All I can tell you is I have tried so hard to get more of these. Look at that phantom in there. Do you see that? It's pure white. I only kept one of these for myself because I just had to have one. Do you see that phantom in there? So when we get really special Lemurian things, I will always come into GemWise and usually into Sabbatical too and say, you have to look at this. But there are times where we get things. Oh, thank you. It's EK. Janet, you'll have to tell me how you pronounce your last name. And thank you guys so much for looking her up. I don't want to ruin it. Is it Patazic? I hate it when people do that to my name, so I apologize, Janet. Anyway, if you got one of those, I'm going to tell you right now, you got something crazy good because I've gone back and tried to get more and they don't have any more. So that's kind of a cool thing. You got a treasure. Yeah, we had them back with the Month of Magic kit, if you remember that. And then we had them separately, like some bigger pieces. So if you scored one of those, you did a good job. Oh, good. Janet's here. Okay, so it sounds like Janet is notified. Just we'll stand by waiting for you, Janet, until you tell me what to do with your crystal. So this is part 1. Are you guys ready for part 2? I hope you're excited. No, so Phantom, Gail's asking, is Phantom not the same as Lemurian? It's not. So Lemurian is just a quartz with the lines, okay? And ideally, the lines are on alternating sides, but they don't have to be. Some Lemurians have lines on all sides. Some Lemurians have lines on one facet, one side, you know, one face, but not on the others, and so that's still a Lemurian. But the Phantoms have a point inside, and so that's what makes them unique. They had a growth disturbance, basically, Phantoms, and so they've got this material, whatever the mineral was that disrupted its growth, forms like a point inside that echoes the growth of the quartz. So here's the point of the quartz. A Phantom is like a point below it, made out of some other mineral that usually is an inclusion that caused a growth interruption. So that's kind of a long technical answer to the question about Phantoms. Oh, I'm so glad. I am so glad. Well, so part 2 will come, and hopefully you enjoy it. You know, part of what I love is enriching your experience. So I really thought those of you in GemWise and those of you in Sabbatical, because we're looking at Lemuria from two different places. In Sabbatical, we're looking more at the energy and the magic and the ritual and how we can integrate some of that wisdom. And then in GemWise, we're looking more at the crystals, obviously. So tonight was like a happy marriage of those two things. So Sage Partners is asking, is there anything else that puts lines on a quartz? I will tell you, I have seen quartz that almost looks like it's Lemurian and not, okay? And I also think about sometimes like the trigonics and quartz that has other impact marks, okay? And there's a lot of talk about what the trigonics are. I call them track marks because I really do believe that the trigonics are almost like landing points. I believe that the track marks of the trigonics are made from alien contact, extraterrestrial contact. It's my personal opinion, because when I work with the trigonics, I instantly am in another realm. I mean, for me, it's a beeline to astral travel. It's very easy for me to go out of my body, but I find the trigonics do that in a much more rapid way. So I think a lot of the marks that are pseudo-Lemurian still have a connection to these outer realms, whether it's alien, extraterrestrial contact, which of course we know is star contact. It's just contact with star beings from other galaxies. I even hate to use the word alien or extraterrestrial because it's got these connotations of like kind of stupid stuff, and it's not stupid. I mean, aliens are really just beings who are inhabiting a different realm, a different energetic space than we are, but we're all experiencing the same space-time continuum. So. Oh, I'm so glad. Okay, so we'll talk about all that. I will tell you that aliens visit my family. My mom has been in direct contact many times. And so if you ever want to hear really good alien stories, I sure have a few to share with you. But I will tell you, I am one of the people who will tell you they are so real. They're so real. And my family has a lot of proof. But, it's funny. I think just like some of us get contacted by aliens, and some of us have abduction experiences, and some of us have that contact, which has been all the way through my family. I think that's also what's happening with the Lemurian civilization. I think some of us are being activated for a specific reason. And I don't know what that is yet, but I have a feeling we're getting close to figuring it out. But yeah, I'd be happy to share my stories with you. But I will tell you, there isn't a shred of doubt in my mind. Not a shred. And the funniest story is, my mom and my grandmother were both visited at the same time, same night. My grandma's been gone for almost 30 years, so it was a long time ago. I was like 12 or 13 at the time. And my grandma was a minister, born again Christian, very religious person, still a medium, same gifts that all women in my family had. But my mom's a little more out there, so for my mom, when they talked to us about it the next day, for my mom to say, oh, the aliens were here and the ship landed and she drew it and talked about it and they lost time, they thought it was 10 minutes. It turned out it was 6 hours that they were sitting there staring at this thing. They lost time, which is another hallmark characteristic of the experience. But for my grandmother, so when I listened to my mom, I looked over at my grandmother and I said, how do you explain what you saw? And my grandmother looked at me and said, don't ever ask me to talk about that again. No joke. And she never talked about it again. She said, I'm a Christian woman, and I don't have a way to explain to you what I saw, but I can't reconcile that with what I've believed my whole life. And so please don't ever ask me to talk about it again. And I never did until she passed away. So, it's interesting, right? When somebody who feels that way, it's usually not because they're making something up. It's usually because they had an intense experience. They don't know how to reconcile it. And she never did figure out how to reconcile it. That's why I'm her granddaughter. Anyway, all right, you guys have a great, great, great rest of your evening. It was so fun to be here with you. I could talk about everything we've talked about tonight, all night long. So we always talk about the grand sleepover that we're going to have one day. Sabbatical is actually planning one. It's more Illumina who's planning a visit to Sage Goddess for an overnight of some kind. So that's exciting too. So more to come. I will see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. Remember, this is recorded. So if you ever want to go back and watch from the beginning and kind of, take notes and just enjoy it again, you're always welcome to do that. But I love you lots, and I will see you soon. Have a good night, everybody. Congrats, Janet. Let me know what to do with your crystal. I can't wait to work with it for you if you'd like me to do that.